Hey, I'm Liz from No Trace. My daughter has had this Patagonia fleece for a couple of years now. It's held up really well, except that on one of the sleeves, the elastic cuff is starting to come off and the sleeve itself is starting to split apart. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to fix both of those things with just a needle and a thread. You really don't need any special sewing skills. I'm going to walk you through it, so let's go. All right, let me show you how to do this really simple repair. So first off, you are going to need some thread and a needle to do some hand sewing. And this is the closest color I have to the blue cuff here. So I'm going to be using this to sew the blue cuff back on. And then I would normally use a white thread for this, but I'm going to use a darker thread just so you can see how I am repairing this part of the sleeve. So the first thing to do is to turn the sleeve and the whole fleece wrong side out to make it a little bit easier to work with. And next I am going to repair this part of the sleeve that started to separate. This fleece has a little bit of elastic inside the seam, and this I believe they have just to help sort of stabilize the seam, and I'm just going to leave it in place and kind of pretend it's not there, so you don't really need to do anything if you have that. So let me show you how to sew. We're going to take our needle and our thread. This is actually a denim thread, but I think the color is a little bit easier for you to see. And I'm going to thread one end of the thread into the head of the needle. And then I'm going to pull it down to the other end. So I have a double strand of thread that is going to be running through my needle. And I'm going to tie these two ends together in a double knot. Okay, so there is my double knot in the end of the thread, and I am going to repair this part of the fleece with a really simple whip stitch, and I will show you how to do that. Actually, I'm going to trim away this little loose bit of thread, and I want to start my whip stitch a little bit back where before the actual opening begins, just to kind of reinforce this area. So I am going to push my needle through both layers of fabric right at the same area or the same seam allowance as the original seam. I'm just going to pull the thread all the way through, and then I'm just going to go back over next to my knot. And since this is an item of clothing that gets a lot of use and a lot of action, you could say, taking it on and off, washing it, I'm going to make my stitches pretty close together. So I'm going to make them about 1/8 of an inch apart. If you were repairing something that didn't get a lot of wear and tear, you could make your stitches further apart. But if it's something like the sleeve, right by the ending of the sleeve, right by the hand, you probably want your stitches pretty close together. So I'm just going to keep bringing the needle around this seam here, just coming from this side to the other side. So I'm always coming from the same side towards the back, grabbing the two layers and pulling the thread all the way through. I'm going to keep doing this, and I'll be right back. Okay, I made it to the end of the sleeve, so now I'm just going to tie a little knot. So I'm going to bring my needle back to the other side. I'm going to go under a nearby stitch close to the end to create a little loop. And then I'm going to go into my loop to create a knot. And I'll do that one more time to make sure my knot is super secure. And I also trimmed a little bit of the extra tail of the thread away from the knots. Next up, I am going to fix the elastic cuff part. And oftentimes the elastic cuff, if it hasn't totally stretched out, it's actually going to be a little bit shorter than the sleeve. So you might have to stretch it over the sleeve. And in this case, I am going to pin it in place so that if I have to stretch it at all, it stays stretched. That way, after I'm done sewing, things will kind of shrink back up. The elastic will kind of come back in. But first we want to stretch it and pin it. So let me get my straight pins here. And I'm just going to carefully do this one at a time, making sure to catch the cuff and the sleeve and make sure that the cuff has a little stretch in it all the way around. Okay, so I've got the cuff pinned onto the end of the sleeve, and I also have my needle threaded with another double strand of thread and a little double knot at the end. Next, I'm going to be doing a very simple straight stitch, and I actually want to start my stitches where the cuff is still intact. So I'm not going to start where the cuff has started to come apart. I'm going to start a little bit to the back, and I am just going to sew right along the original seam from the back to the front. And then I'm going to make a really small stitch and go again from the front to the back. And I want to make sure I'm catching the cuff and the sleeve in each of my stitches. So it's good to do this with a little patience. No need to rush because you're trying to catch 3 layers here. And the smaller and straighter your stitches are, the less visible they're going to be. So I'm just going to keep making small straight stitches from front to back, and I will be right back. Okay, I finished my new stitches. I know it's kind of hard for you to see. And I, just like at the beginning, I sewed over the original intact seam as well, so that I'm reinforcing this section of the sleeve, not just the section that's ripped away. So I'm just going to do a couple little double knots on the inside of the sleeve, and then this repair job is finished. And now the sleeve is totally fixed. Hooray! If you have more things to fix in your closet or around your house, I am linking to a playlist of other tutorials I've created to help you mend your things. So it's in the description box below this video. Check it out.